So the news about George Wendt passing away, it really got us thinking about Norm Peterson, didn't it? From Cheers.
Oh, absolutely. Such an iconic character.
Yeah, and it feels like it's more than just, remembering a funny performance. It's digging into what made him, and especially Norm, such a fixture for so many people.
Right. We're not just doing a standard obituary here.
Exactly. We want to sort of understand the whole journey, his impact.
And we've got a pretty detailed CNN report as our main source. It covers his life, his career highlights, gives us a good starting point.
Okay. So the mission for this deep dive then is to pull out the really insightful bits about his path from like the early improv days right through Cheers and everything after.
That's the plan. To get a richer sense of what he brought to comedy and why his work, especially as Norm, still connects.
Great. So let's start where a lot of comedy stories seem to start. Chicago, the second city.
A legendary place.
He joined the main stage there in 1975. What was the significance of that exactly? Joining Second City back then?
Well, joining the main stage was, a really big deal. Second City is just this incubator for comedic talent, especially improv. It's a real proving ground.
Right.
The CNN report mentions he was in a specific review, One More with Fooling. And these reviews, they're basically sketch shows the cast creates and performs together.
Okay.
So doing that, plus touring with the company, that would sharpen his skills incredibly. Thinking on his feet, building scenes, connecting with a live audience, really fundamental stuff.
Yeah, you can sort of see how that training would feed into his later work, especially on a sitcom stage.
Definitely. That live audience energy, the timing.
And then 1980 comes around, and he leaves Second City to pursue film and TV. That feels like a significant shift.
It is. It suggests, he wanted maybe a broader reach, different kinds of challenges beyond the stage.
And those early TV roles, like on Taxi or Alice, they were maybe smaller parts?
Yeah, likely stepping stones. Getting familiar with being on camera, learning the ropes of TV production. Important groundwork, really.
Groundwork that led, in 1982, to the big one. Norm Peterson. Cheers.
The role of a lifetime.
Yeah, even saying Cheers brings back this warm feeling, And Norm was so central to that. For anyone listening who maybe didn't grow up with it, what made Norm so beloved?
Oh, Norm was just... He was the ultimate regular, right? The guy who belonged there.
Yeah.
His interest.
The Norm.
Exactly. That became legendary. He represented that comfort of routine, the guy with the witty, kind of dry observation about life, work, and just wanting a cold beer.
A constant presence. Reliable laughs.
And the show itself, running for 11 seasons, that's an incredible run. It really set a standard for ensemble comedy.
And he got recognized for it, too. 6 Emmy nominations back-to-back.
Yeah, 6 years in a row, 84 to 89, for Outstanding Supporting Actor.
What does that kind of consistent nomination tell you?
It says his performance wasn't just a one-hit wonder. It was consistently high quality, deeply appreciated by his peers, by the industry, and obviously by viewers. It shows real impact.
And Rhea Perlman's statement about him that CNN included, it sounds really heartfelt.
It really does, calling him the sweetest, kindest man and talking about their dynamic, Carla and Norm.
Right, that specific detail about him always having that same stool, it just cemented the character.
Uh-huh. And her mentioning their sort of Withly sparring matches, comedically.
Yeah.
That really captures their chemistry, doesn't it?
It does. And it's amazing, really, that he, Ted Danson, and Rhea Perlman were the only 3 actors in every single episode.
Across all 11 seasons. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that speaks volumes about how essential they were to the show's core.
It's also interesting hearing his own take on it later. Like last year, he apparently called it a great job. Simple as that.
Yeah, and John Ratzenberger joking that they felt like they were stealing money.
Huh. What does that suggest about the atmosphere on set? Maybe they were surprised by how big it got.
Could be. It sounded like they genuinely enjoyed it, maybe felt a bit lucky even. That story about the beer on set.
Oh, yeah, the near beer.
Right, the fake stuff. But then maybe having a real one after taping.
Yeah.
It adds that nice little human touch behind the scenes.
But Wendt's own quote about Norm from that podcast, still here, Hollywood. That really hits it, I think.
Which part?
I had to look like a guy who wanted another beer. That I can do.
Ah, yes. It's so perfectly understated, isn't it? It captures Norm's whole essence.
And he gave credit where it was due, too. Praising the writers.
Called them a murderer's row. Yeah, he clearly knew how crucial that writing was. It gave him the material to shine.
Absolutely. But Norm, as unforgettable as he is, wasn't his only role. The CNN piece makes that clear. He had a really substantial career beyond Cheers.
He really did, which speaks to his versatility. People wanted to work with him.
What else stands out for you from his other work? Films, other TV shows?
Well, he did films like Dreamscape, Forever Young,
Yeah.
showing he could handle different genres. But his guest spots on TV are pretty remarkable.
Like where?
Shows like Seinfeld, The Larry Sanders Show. I mean, those were huge influential comedies in their own right.
Yeah.
Popping up there showed he could fit into any top-tier comedic world.
Even appearing on something like The Twilight Zone, that shows some range beyond just laughs.
Exactly. He did have his own shows for a bit.
Right, the George Wendt show in '95, and he was a regular on The Naked Truth.
They might not have hit the heights of Cheers, obviously, but landing those lead roles, carrying your own series, it shows the industry saw him as a leading talent.
And we can't forget Bob Swirsky on SNL, The Bears.
Oh, absolutely. That recurring character, Bob Swirsky, that tapped into something different again, that whole Chicago sports superfan thing.
Working with Chris Farley, Mike Myers, Robert Smigel, that must have been amazing.
For sure. And it connects right back to his Chicago roots, that ability to just nail those very specific, kind of over-the-top but relatable characters.
It really is fascinating how all these different roles show different sides of his talent. And he kept working, didn't he? Even in more recent years.
Oh, yeah, consistently. Guest spots on shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Portlandia, Fresh Off the Boat, Kirstie, Franklin and Bash. He stayed busy. He was a familiar face for decades.
Because it kept popping up. A welcome sight.
Definitely. And it feels kind of perfect, that connection back to his beginnings with that roast at Second City in 2017.
I can't believe they went there. Great title.
Isn't it? And hosted by his nephew, Jason Sudeikis.
Wow, I didn't realize Sudeikis was his nephew.
Yeah. And the event raised money for Gilda's Club Chicago and the Second City Alumni Fund. It really brings everything full circle, back to Chicago, back to comedy roots.
That's really nice. And apparently, Wendt spoke very fondly of Sudeikis recently, called him so smart, so thoughtful.
Yeah, at a podcast interview just this year, it adds that lovely personal layer, doesn't it? Reminds you there's a family behind the famous face. CNN mentioned they'd reached out to Sudeikis for comment, actually.
It's good they did.
Absolutely. And the report notes his final credited role was actually just this year, 2024, in a TV movie called Love Second Act. So he kept performing right near the end.
Wow.
And, the report mentions his surviving family, his wife, Bernadette Burkett, their kids, Hillary, Joe, and Daniel, and their request for privacy, of course. It's a reminder of the personal loss behind the public figure.
A doting family man, they called him.
Yeah.
So looking back at the whole picture, it's quite a journey, isn't it? From Chicago improv stages to becoming this global TV icon as Norm.
And then just continuing to work, showing up in all sorts of interesting places in film and TV for decades after.
It wasn't just one role. Even though Norm was huge, it was sustained talent.
Exactly. It's a testament to his comedic skill, his adaptability, and just his ability to connect with people through these characters.
And the affection from colleagues, like that Rhea Perlman statement and that big celebration back at Second City, it really paints a picture of someone well-liked and respected.
It certainly seems that way, a genuinely positive impact.
Which kind of brings us back to Norm, and maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Why do characters like Norm Peterson stick with us so much?
Good question.
Think about it, The familiar face at the bar, the guy who just wants the simple things, good company, a cold drink. What is it about that resonates so deeply, even now?
Yeah. Maybe it's the comfort, the relatability, the humor in the everyday grind.
Could be all of that. It's definitely something to ponder as we remember George Wendt and the character he made truly unforgettable.